So we're talking about the carbon cycle. Okay, so just going over this image here that's in your textbook, you'll see different images. It's just recognizing the pattern because they're all going to be talking about the same thing. It starts off with the air. So here we have air. This is my drawings of air, little squiggly lines. And what those squiggly lines are made up of is CO2. One of the few things. Let's just talk about carbon dioxide, for example. We know trees, these guys over here, trees breathe. That's a terrible tree. This is my tree. I'm just sort of outlining the one there. Oh. So trees breathe CO2. We breathe out CO2. Trees breathe in CO2. That's what this arrow here is representing. Trees, very important. You know, you see all those signs like "Don't waste paper." These come from trees. Trees are important because they breathe in CO2. Well, what do they do when they breathe in CO2? They make sugars and they make other things that we eat. And trees aren't the only thing. Algae also breathe in CO2, but this photo is just showing the trees for now. So they breathe them in. This is like a tree that's fallen down, so the tree falls down. It's like a dead tree, and it decomposes and goes into the earth. Another way that can go back into the earth, the carbon can go back into the earth, is when animals eat trees or plants, or we eat the plants and the animals die, we go into the ground, and the carbon sort of comes with us. So that's what happens. Trees start, they take in the carbon dioxide, we can eat the plants or whatnot, but organisms eventually die as well. Organisms break down sugar molecules made by plants, etc., etc. Carbon dioxide is released as waste. So yeah, that happens as well. And then, anyways, the point being, carbon ends up going into the ground. Once the carbon is in the ground, there's different ways that it can come back up, and that's what the rest of the letters are going to take us through. So let's clear that. Okay, so let's read what E has to say. So this carbon goes down, and eventually, over thousands, millions of years, it comes down to this level. So under certain conditions, the remains of some dead organisms may gradually change into fossil fuels, such as coal, gas, and oil. These carbon compounds are energy rich. So carbon from the air, from plants, it gets sucked into the plant world, and then from the plant world, it can get sucked into the human world or just go straight into the ground. When organisms die, their carbon-containing molecules become part of the soil. These molecules are broken down by fungi, bacteria, other decomposers. So when you see something dead on the ground, you see like fungus and stuff growing out of it, like it's being decomposed. Turning this decay process, carbon dioxide is released in the air. So those little organisms that break things down, like the bacteria and whatnot, they also breathe air, and that's another way that it can go back up. So the ones that don't get broken down can eventually make their way, carbon can eventually make its way to this underground area here, this sort of representing oil, and that can be like pumped back up by a factory. So factories can pump back up this oil, and here's just showing, here's a truck, it's running on diesel fuel, so it comes from oil, and so does normal fuel, like refined gasoline. Okay, so we got that. Carbon dioxide comes down, sugars and whatnot can be eaten, etc., and then we can die, and then bacteria decomposes. The bacteria also breathe, but if whatever they don't decompose can get sucked down, oil back up. Okay, so we're going to talk about other ways that it can go back up. You see most of these arrows are pointing upward. Few of them are downward, and the ones that are downward begin with trees. That's why they're so important, and algae as well. Okay, so What are ways that animals release CO2? Well, how do you release CO2? We talked about it before, and breathe. So it can easily go, trees breathe this in, bring this in, and we eat it, and we breathe out. So that's how carbon gets back out. What does B read? Organisms break down. Oh, yeah, we already read that. So another thing that can happen is trees breathe in the CO2, and then there's a forest fire, and the trees then release carbon dioxide back. It also happens not just a forest fire, but if you're burning wood, that also releases, like in a fireplace or something, that releases CO2 back up as well. All right, that's pretty much it with the carbon cycle. So carbon dioxide starts in the air. It goes down via plants and algae. Plants and algae. Okay. It goes down, and then we eat the plants, etc. Organisms eat, or like bacteria and whatnot can like eat us when we die, or our waste. They eat our waste, etc. And those organisms breathe. So it goes back up. Be they us, we breathe, or I don't know, like bacteria, whatnot, breathes. That's also another way of it going back up. Whatever isn't eaten, like meat that isn't eaten or decomposed, dissolve or not dissolves, like goes down further, bones or whatnot, into the ground, and it can eventually turn into oil. And oil has its way of coming up by humans pumping it up. Okay, it's used by factories, used by cars, whatever. That's all how it can come back up. The other way it can come back up is if just straight from the wood, it's burnt and it goes back up. Okay, carbon cycle, CO2, plants and algae, back up, organisms or oil. Okay.